Good to go. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome to the January 16th, 2024 first meeting of the year for our city council. And with that, if you could all rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. If we can get a roll call, please.
Councilmember Stroman?
Here.
Councilmember Walker?
Here.
Councilmember Hagan?
Here.
Councilmember Engel?
Here.
Mayor Bellinger?
Here.
Mayor, if I could kindly interrupt you. We actually have a presentation that Chief Flores would like to do.
I thought we might.
Yes.
Thank you. May I have Brianna Ryman come to the podium, please? Good evening, Mayor, council members, family, friends, and members of the community. Tonight is just another great night for the City of Escalon and the Escalon Police Department. I am proud to present you the department's newest reserve officer, Officer Brianna Ryman. Officer Ryman was born in the city of Lodi and moved to the city of Escalon in 2012. She attended El Portel Middle School and graduated from the Escalon High School. She is currently attending the CSU Stanislaus in Turlock and is getting ready to graduate in the spring of 2024. Present tonight is her mother, Lisa DeSandro, her stepfather, Michael DeSandro, her father, Kevin Ryman, her stepmother, Michelle Ryman, her sister, Paige Jasso, her brother-in-law, Justin Jasso, and her niece, Sandy Jasso. At this time, we'll be doing the pinning. The pinning will be done by her mother, Lisa, and her father, Kevin. Go ahead, stand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to start to say, I began working for the city of Escalon in 2018 as an explorer. I was 15 years old. Ever since then, I just fell in love with the career. I started working records in 2021, and in 2023, I began the academy while still working records. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to become a reserve officer today. I would like to thank everyone that did show up today. I can't, there's so many people, I can't even begin to list off some names, but everyone in the department, the academy staff, if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be here today. Some people I want to give a little shout out to is Officer Kais and Officer Harrison for teaching me at the Explorer meetings when I was growing up. They've always lent a helping hand when I was struggling in the academy. They always helped me with my firearms training. Luis Chavez from Public Works, although he doesn't have experience with law enforcement, he's always lent a helping hand and advice. I'd like to thank Gus for bringing me into the department when he was a sergeant. He sat on my ORA board panel for an explorer, and so he brought me in here, and now he's bringing me in as a reserve. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Sergeant Zambrana. He's been my mentor throughout all of it. We came in to the agency at 2018 at around the same time. So we kind of grew up with this agency together. Throughout it all, he's taught me pretty much what it's like to be an officer and just the ins and outs of ride-alongs, meetings, trainings, firearms. Everything I know is thanks to him and to the lovely members of this department. I consider this department a second family, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I look forward to serving the people of Escalon and hopefully going full-time soon. Thank you.
Welcome aboard and congratulations. Look forward to seeing you around town. Any other presentations, Chief?
No, that's it.
Just that? Okay. Next up is our consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual council member or member of the public for special consideration. So taking a look here at the team up here at the pulpit, anybody here have any concerns with any of these items we need to pull?
I'd like to discuss the item 1, please.
Item 1, okay. Item 1 is pulled.
Mr. Mayor, for number 2, I'm going to approve the register of demands, but I'd like to make it noted that I object to the invoice for Blackwater for the wastewater treatment plant project.
Any other concerns here at the council level? Anything that the public would like to pull from the consent calendar before we move forward with this? Seeing none, I'll take a motion for items 2 and 3.
I'll make a motion to approve items number 2 and 3 from the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second on items 2 and 3 of the consent calendar. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries 5-0. Back to item number 1. Councilman Engel, you had a concern?
I do. So Yvette's been doing a great job with the minutes, and I appreciate that. However, I do quite frequently, when I need to recall something a little bit better, refer to the recording on YouTube, which we seem to just consistently be having problems with that. I know we've done something to try and rectify that issue, but it is still happening. I just wanted to make that known before. I don't have any problems with the minutes as they were written, but I really don't have anything to go back and reference to ensure that they are correct. So if we can continue to work on that and come up with a solid plan maybe before next council meeting, that would be great.
All right, with that, then we'll take a motion on item 1.
I will motion to approve item 1 on the consent calendar.
You have a second? I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Next up, staff communications. Who's first?
Thank you, Mayor. Before you, we have all of the reports from the month of December, which would include the treasurer's report, the police department report, animal control report, recreation report, development services report, public works department, building department, water department, wastewater treatment plant, and then I have some city manager report items that I will discuss after our staff goes through. But if you have any questions on any of these items, please let us know.
Any questions for staff?
Sure. This would be for Chief. Chief, on the police report, I noticed there were, I'm trying to scroll there, just about there. 90, where did we go? 92 moving violations. Is that up from the previous month?
Yes, it is.
I would just like to applaud the department. I think that's a pretty good increase, right? Is there anything in particular that drew that increase, or are we just doing better at citations?
No, I think we're working on the direction of you guys, the concerns that we have on streets like California, Yosemite, all the major streets. So we're out there now more enforcing citations. Instead of giving more warnings, we're moving to move more citations.
I appreciate that and applaud your department. I think that's the first step in getting those guys to slow down.
Thank you.
I do have a question on the crime map. I did take a look, it's on page 60. And I don't think that this might be the correct copy. Just I don't see any of the markings on the crime map in particular, and if we can get another copy of the one with the markings on it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We'll get a new one,
Okay,
get an
fantastic.
updated one.
Thank you so much.
Since we're palling on Chief, I'll add to the dog pile and just an overall comment, Chief. In the short time that Officer Harrison has been the SRO, I've received some very rewarding comments from the public. He left, or I would tell him publicly, but as a father of a elementary school student, it's giving our community a peace of mind seeing an SRO travel around to the different schools. So please make sure Officer Harrison knows
that the community appreciates it as well as council.
Most definitely. We've had a lot of positive feedback from family. The kids love him at the schools, especially El Portal. They hit him up for stickers. You have stickers? We ran out of stickers. I bought 500 stickers, and we're out of stickers. So I may have to go back and buy more stickers. But they are really excited to have him at school. Not only the kids, but the parents. And initially, when he went to the first time to dance school, some parent thought that something was happening at the school. And he's like, no, I'm the SRO. And like, the parents like, great, now we have an SRO. So it's been really positive. Positive.
You're good, Chief. I'm good. No questions for me. Any other questions for Chief or the staff?
I'm good right now.
No questions, but a comment for Jalen. Appreciated your monthly report. You've been a busy man. And I wanted to applaud your tact and ability to hold your composure during the last meeting. Thank you.
Right. Go ahead in individual departments here. Jalen, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. 3 items tonight. Wanted to share an update on the housing element status. End of December, staff did submit what's called an initial draft to HCD for their review. That is generally a 90-day review, and they are taking every bit of the 90 days from what we hear. So end of March, when we get their comments back, we will respond, adjust the plan accordingly. We hope to do it in one review cycle. What we are increasingly hearing is that is unlikely at HCD. So we are planning for, subsequent review cycles. But if we do it under one review cycle, we expect to bring, sort of the finalized draft to the Planning Commission and the council in April and May for your adoption. If there's a subsequent review, of course, that would be a couple months after those dates I just mentioned.
Does that affect the deadline at all given by HCD?
Yeah, it would. If we were into subsequent reviews, we would, quote, miss the grace period deadline that has been provided by the state.
And what kind of detrimental effects does that have to the city?
There's a couple of things, depending on how out of compliance your city's housing element is. You can lose state funding. Your general plan could be deemed inadequate because the housing element is a chapter of the general plan. And then one that people think about a lot is something called builder's remedy, where a city, while your housing element is out of compliance, loses less local control over the approval of certain projects.
I don't think we want any of those.
We're working very, very diligently to do this as quickly as possible. A couple projects moving forward at the Planning Commission. They are site and architecture, so will not require city council approval, but we do have a proposed first development in the Liberty Business Park north of 120. It is a proposed steel fabrication business. It is consolidating and relocating elements from the city of Oakdale to the city of Escalon. So that's a potential first development in the Liberty Business Park. And then also a commercial business on McHenry. It is a proposed meat, what'd you call it? Meat store, I don't know. They do some butchering and then commercial sales out of the front part of the building. So that's kind of north, I say McHenry, I should have said Escalon. It's Escalon north of 120. So both of those coming to Planning Commission in the next couple of months. Those plans are online. And then California Mitchell in December, council had staff look at the California Mitchell intersection and generally, circulation, speeding issues around the Dent Elementary School. We promised to come back in February with a proposal We are on track for that. I expect to come back in the next meeting. We do have a scheduled meeting with Dent Elementary leadership next week, later this week? Monday, next week, Monday, to talk about some of our ideas that we're starting to draft and get a better picture of what their long-term improvements to that school look like, where drop-off will be, buses, vehicles, that type of thing. Once we get a little more information from them, we can complete our solutions, proposed solutions, and provide those probably in an update like this to the council at the next meeting. And those are the 3 items.
Chief, any other updates?
I don't have any updates, but I just want to highlight an incident that happened towards the end of December. It was a shoplifting, it's in the report, shoplifting case. And it's just, my staff is working hard to get these people from shoplifting. They find additional charges, they got warrants, so, I mean, they're doing a great job trying to get these people out of town. And they're not from town, they're from out of town, so, just want to say that.
I don't have anything.
Okay, so I have some items listed, but I also have some other items. Update on the SRO, we did have our 2+2 meeting last week with the school district and the superintendent, as well as the board members that were present. Nothing but good things to say about our SRO being there. They're very, very happy with us providing that service. They are talking about making some additional amendments to the agreement, and so they're supposed to send those over to me, so it could possibly be that there might be some minor amendments to the contract that we would bring back, depending on what we're looking at. They would like to see him to be able to go to other schools that are within the district that aren't in city limits, so we are reaching out to the sheriff's department to make sure that that's okay with them, because that is their jurisdiction. And then some other minor items that they were looking to potentially update. And if those move forward, we'll bring those back to council for review. SB2 grant. I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, the city applied for an SB2 planning grant. It was a $160,000 grant, and the city utilized it to pay a portion of our previous housing element update. We also used it to cover the costs associated with our municipal services review, as well as the drafting and approval of both our multifamily design guidelines as well as our senior housing design guidelines. I'm happy to say that the final check came through and we've been fully reimbursed. So we did receive a check for the remaining amount that we were seeking, which was close to $109,000. So that's going to go into our general fund as reimbursement for past expenses over the years. So I just wanted to put that out there and let you know. And then also, you may be aware that we're currently in a 5-year agreement with the city of Oakdale regarding animal control. We originally went to the city of Oakdale because as the city, we were having trouble maintaining staff levels there. They were part-time staff people, huge amounts of turnover, which made it impossible for us to keep the facility open during the times that we were advertising. We also did get to a point where our police department and police officers were assisting with a lot of the animal services calls. So at that time, we looked into Oakdale and San Joaquin County, and we're able to execute an agreement. I'd say we're moving into our 2nd year, I believe, pretty close to a year. However, I just wanted to update the council. We're early in the stages, and Mayor Pro Tem Hagan is aware as well, because they brought it up at the last meeting, that the current shelter that they have is reaching its last capacity here. They have constant issues with too many animals, not enough space. It's antiquated, it's aging, and so they've put out there at very, very early stages that they would be seeking to build a brand new shelter. Apparently the shelter in the city of Oakdale was built when they were a population of 4,000. And so they're now a population probably between 25,000, 30,000. They also provide services to the city of Riverbank. And the city of Riverbank is very interested in continuing to pursue animal services with the city of Oakdale, because for them it's very, very convenient. Stanislaus County animal shelters across the entire county from Riverbank, and so having it at Oakdale benefits them. So as this moves forward and things move forward, they're gonna be looking to us to provide a solid yes or no or maybe. And so I have let our finance consultant know, and we'll be working on that as things move forward. Right now, it's putting it out there. We just, we looked at the potential of expanding the existing facility and/or building new. And basically with what they have now, they're saying we'll need to build new. And so we've got time. We have 4 years left on the contract. I just wanted to put that out there so you guys are aware. Okay, and then some other items, discussion and direction on permanent vote by mail drop box. So I know I've had past correspondence with you regarding a permanent drop box. San Joaquin County Registrar of Voters is interested in putting in a permanent vote by mail box to be located on city property and or somewhere in the city. Their goal is to provide equal access to everyone to drop off their ballots. So they reached out to me and we've talked over the last several weeks. What they would do is install a permanent drop box, and I have some potential locations. The drop box themselves, I forgot to actually upload the photos, but I did send a picture out. They're pretty large because they are a larger setting drop box, much larger than we had it in-house here. And essentially for 30 days prior to election, they would install a camera that would be monitoring the drop box for a 24-hour period, live streaming it on their website. So anybody could watch that drop box for 30 days prior to election. And then when it's not in use during election, they would lock it off, but it would still remain in place. So in speaking with the Registrar of Voters, they've basically advised they're required per state law to install 21 of them in the county. At this point in time, they just want to meet their requirement. So in the interest that the city wasn't interested in doing it, they're not going to fight us on it, except for in the event that somebody complains that there's no Dropbox location located in the city. If the city was to decide we don't want one on any of our facilities, or we don't want to have one at City Hall, they would go to a private company. If somebody said, there's no Dropbox in Escalon, can you add one? Potential businesses that they were looking at were the Orlando's Market and the Ace Hardware, Ace Hardware's had a location located in their spot in past elections. Orlando's comes up because they've installed one at the Linden location in Orlando's. And so I wanted to put that out there to get direction from council on whether or not you would be interested. If you are interested, I did have our Public Works Superintendent go out and take some pictures of potential areas that we think it might be suitable for. So this picture would be the City Hall location, and so it would essentially be coming around the building, and then when you're pulling up in front of our office, or you come in front of utilities, the main door here, it would be located on this corner back here.
Do we have
Installed in that
pictures of-
landscape median.
Do we have pictures of the drop boxes?
I do have them. I forgot to upload it on here, so I could go grab them really quick and forward
About
them.
twice the size of the podium, just for your
About
vision.
that size,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. In width and height, or?
Probably honestly a little bit more in
Little
depth.
lower.
The height, yes, a little bit
Yeah.
wider and a little bit deeper, but the height, yes.
And they're bright, red, white, and blue, bright colored.
Oh,
Can I ask you a
okay.
question? This has always been inside in the,
A smaller
Yes.
version has been
smaller
inside,
version.
not the size that they're wanting to put permanently outside.
and my concern is the abuse of these things, to be
Yeah, I
quite
asked who would
honest
be
with
taking
you.
care of graffiti and vandalism and.
Well, not that kind of abuse. I'm talking like ballot stuffing type stuff. So I think the more oversight on it, the better, is my opinion. So I would really want to see how you have it set up before I would really want to put my,
He's into it.
full weight behind it as far as my own opinion,
Sure.
because that's a big concern.
And as, I could actually go and grab photos when we move into matters presented by the audience. That way I can upload them real quick and bring them back up if needed. But their main emphasis was they'll pay anything they need to pay to do it. So we'll pour the concrete, we'll install it, we'll take care of everything. They are trying to get it in by their deadline, which is February 5th. The only cities that they have advised me have approved it thus far are the city of Stockton and the city of Lathrop. And then they did advise me that the city of Lodi has not agreed to do so. They've said no. And so at this point in time, Lodi doesn't have a box located there. They said in the event that somebody from the city complains that there is no drop box, that's when they're gonna start reaching out to either the city and ask them to reconsider, or they'll go to a private company. And so they wanted us to be aware, it's not something we have to do. We're not at this point in time required to have it. But in the event that we say no, it could potentially pop up somewhere else in town. And so.
Does this mean that the boxes they put inside our city hall or inside the Ace Hardware store, they're not doing that anymore going forward?
Oh my gosh.
You want just these boxes with cameras? Is that what we're saying?
They
Sure,
did not
everybody, it's just a
indicate,
picture of
they
it,
did not
I'm passing
indicate
it
not
down.
having those. Got the pictures,
Yeah,
yeah.
picture of the box.
Thank you for pulling that up. I was so focused on.
So
looking at these
that's the
pictures that I
size
forgot
of
to
a
add them all
towable
up.
generator and
I
then
missed the
some.
answer to that question. Will there still
Wow.
be inside
Videos.
locations?
They haven't confirmed with me at all that they wouldn't not have them still. So those could potentially be the ones that they only put out at election time. I can follow up and confirm with them.
I'd just
but
be
they didn't
curious.
indicate not having those.
If we didn't put the box in, if they brought the small ones in like we've been doing for how many years now,
Yeah,
instead of permanently erecting some structure that is really huge.
and permanent.
And permanent, that's a concern.
It's large, and that's why I had sent you guys the photos.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking the little box that was up in the front.
Yes.
And then when I saw that picture, I was like, holy smokes.
Why does it have to be so big?
Yeah,
I do
so somebody
feel,
can fit in it. No,
That's a
I'm just kidding.
concrete
I'm just kidding.
My lord.
I do feel more comfortable with something that can be more monitored, like Councilman Hagan was saying. So I think I'd like to look into whether those would still exist, and
Okay.
if they do.
I could follow up,
Oh, no.
and I could provide you an updated information via email. That way it's a little quicker per se.
I'm guessing if they put them in businesses, they're not gonna have the cameras that they're talking about with the permanent ones.
The permanent ones, the
have to.
cameras are only up for 30 days.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we don't do a permanent one and they allow us in the hallway or in a business, most businesses aren't gonna allow you to have 24/7 monitoring of their business
No,
for a box.
And these boxes here have to be outside. They don't want
Yeah,
these boxes
right.
on the inside.
Yeah, I know. That's,
and they did indicate that they don't have to be drive up,
Just walkable.
just accessible. And so that's why I had Justin pull up some locations.
what else we
So-
got for options here?
Yeah, so City Hall, that's where, of course, they're looking to have it.
And that would be moving that rock in a bush, and they'd be pouring a slab there, just on the backside of that sidewalk, just for your.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you would have to get out of your car and put that in there. The spot that I thought would be best was the library location. We were looking at putting it over in this area. Obviously, the library is owned by the city, but we do have San Joaquin County there running the library. So it's their staffing that's already in there, county-wise. We feel like the library is kind of more centered in town compared to City Hall. And then I feel like because it's also in our downtown area, more people would utilize it in that location. So this was the area I thought it would look best. And easiest because there's already concrete there, so they would essentially just add it in there, put the camera up for those 30 days, and then completely lock it off. And be able to trust, county department staff to maintain it for them because the same agency, just different department. And then the third location we had was the community center. There's obviously a few different areas of bark that we can consider pouring a slab in and adding it. We can add one in the parking lot area. This was the most open area where you'd be able to pull up and drop off, and we would add something, we'd have them add some type of concrete grounding here and then have the box in there. So those were the three areas we were looking at.
Did the county consider using post offices and their locations for these things?
So,
Just a thought.
no,
I'm sure it's been said out loud,
we
but
thought about the post office, but
no, it's not our
they're very,
property.
very strict because it's federally ran. We could reach out to them, but we did have a circumstance where all we had was a bus sign there a few months ago, and it had actually been there for several years, and for some reason, all of a sudden, it became an issue, and they made us pull it out. And so,
I'm sure there was
I don't know if you
complications.
have any follow-up on that. Do you think they'd be open to a box by the post office?
I would go probably with no.
I would too, but I had to ask.
Yeah.
That would also be an ideal location. We could definitely reach out and see.
Right next to the post office box, and you drive around and drop it off, don't have to get out of the car. It's already set up for that,
Yeah.
but
But the goal from the county was,
city property.
box accessible even after hours, and I think that's something that they've struggled with in the past, is when we've had the box here, we close at 5, and a lot of city halls close at 5. However, on election day, we used to keep it open till 8 a.m., and so we would have staffing here and leave it open, or they would move their staffing out front with the box to be able to make sure all of the ballots were getting gathered, so. So I could reach back out to them, find out whether or not they'll be continuing to utilize the little mini boxes that they put sporadically through town. Is there any other questions you'd like me to gain additional information on?
See, I'm not really a fan of that big box anywhere in any location, but I understand the importance of that. But yeah, I'd like to know if they are gonna use the other boxes in the future. We do need someplace to drop off our ballots. So we gotta find a solution to that. But it's interesting, how many other cities in the county have said no? Or if I guess at least,
Just one has been a
at least have
confirmed
not-
no. Everyone else is in process.
they are in process.
So they haven't said, it's not my understanding that they've said yes, because I think they would have told me that. So they're reviewing it, considering it.
Have you had a problem with the way it was ran prior?
The election boxes?
Like-
No,
Yeah,
not that I'm aware
if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Thank you.
of. Yeah.
Kinda how I look at it.
Yeah, not specifically, I mean, obviously, the only one that we would see on a regular basis is the one that's up front. And so during business hours, we have the roll-up door rolled up, and so staff would be able to see it, because it's right here, right by this door. And so, I mean, I think the only issue that's been a main concern is, our offices are closed, so if you're coming after 5, you can't drop it off there. And, we don't typically tell people to drop it off any other way. We don't want to instruct anybody on how to go about doing that, so.
Yeah, I know it's not convenient sometimes, but voting does take effort,
Just find out
Questions?
just find out if they got those boxes and get back to us on that and see what they say.
Anything else?
Any thought?
Next item, city-owned properties. So council is aware that we have the city-owned properties, the 18-acre parcel, orchard located next to Hogan Park, and then we also have 7 acres at the corner of St. John and Catherine. We've put that out for requests for proposals twice now. The first round, we had one response. The second time, but that was for not asking what we were looking for proposal-wise. The second one was no response. So currently at this time, unless there's any other direction provided by staff, what we are in the process of doing is obtaining quotes from 3 vendors to see how much it would cost for us to completely remove all the trees in both locations, as well as stumps. And then we also are working with a group, the Greater Valley Conservation Corps, or Corps, and they're in the process of putting something together for us. They might be able to provide us some assistance in completing that work at a discounted price or rate. And so as soon as we have those items together, I can report back to council on and find out which way the council would like to move forward or get confirmation from you. But that's kind of where we're at, and unless there's any other direction on these properties, that's what we're doing at this time.
I'm cleared and go from there. Yeah, let's see what's gonna cost us.
Sooner the better.
Sorry?
The sooner the better.
Sooner better, yes.
Oh.
And then Main Street Improvement Project. Obviously, we've conducted our 2 workshops. We have additional feedback as indicated at this earlier workshop. As staff, we're going to take all of that information and basically put together some revisions of options, and we could bring those back to council. But I want to find out if there's anything else that council wants staff to do in the meantime. It might not be on the next meeting. It might take another meeting. It might be the second meeting in February that we have all that stuff done. We're not in a rush. And so any feedback or additional things you'd like staff to do as a part of this project, please let us know.
Mayor, can I say something? I would like to see us reach out more aggressively to the railroad and see if we can't figure out, you know, some sort of lease option to buy, lease long-term, some sort of future buy point as far as, you know, some way that we can work out if we're going to do this park, then like Councilman Sean had brought up, we're not dealing with improving something and then having to pay more for it. The other thing would be to, you know, not that you're not, you know, listening and stuff, so don't take it the wrong way, but
Yeah.
just to really listen to the citizens as to what they've told you in the meetings, and really try to, when you go back to the drawing board and look at this, really go ahead and try to look at it from the idea of, you know, reserving and conserving long-term values and traditions, as well as understanding, you know, what kind of community we are. In other words, we're not trying to be someone else. We are who we are, and just sticking to those core values. And I think it would go over well with the community, but if not, if we have more transparency issues, then I can see it not really going where it should go.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak?
Please.
So, without going off on a long diatribe, just want to say that as it stands currently, I don't think we have very, very little community support the way that the project is designed currently. So the way it is right now, obviously, I think there are some major redesign efforts that are needed. I do have a request of staff, and that is, in the future, if there are projects like this coming before council, please bring it to us ahead of time. Please let us know what's going on with the project ahead of time. There's, over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been contacted by different community members asking me about meetings, asking me about, have we seen the design? What are your thoughts? And candidly, I've had to respond, I don't know much about it, because first time I, as a council member, really heard a lot of the detailed information about the project was earlier this evening. And I feel like that's doing a disservice to our community as well as a disservice to the council. So in the future, if we're doing a project like this, let's get out ahead of it and advise council way ahead of time, even before it goes out to bid, because that will drive community buy-in and transparency.
Ask of staff. One would be a summary of the 2 workshops that had happened. If you could just provide what the general consensus was, maybe items that came up repeatedly, right, that showed there was a large want from the community. Also, a list of the amount of participants and the findings from the survey that you provided. Just an overall general report, kind of where we stand right now, what we heard that folks want, what we heard that folks don't want, just to make sure that that's all captured and that could be presented to the council as well as to the public at that time.
Yeah.
Please.
I'd also just like to request some clear and transparent communication between staff and council. I did feel when it came to council for the approval of it, and there had been so many revisions, there was not a map or any of those revisions included in the agenda packet, or hadn't been approached about any of those revisions from workshop, where it was just bike path to that final that was trying to be approved to go through. I do feel like I was a little bit left out and left out of the dark, and that's not exactly how I feel that this should, I would hope that council would be consulted by staff in some of those communications, as well as, you know, and in this last week or so, this map that was provided today, it hadn't been provided to me. So I would like some of that correspondence and let us know where we are on updates on these big projects, important projects in Escalon. I am receiving those sometimes from the community, and again, like Councilman Stroman, you just have to say, no, this is the first time I'm seeing it is from you, and I'm not sure why staff's communicating with some of the community members without also communicating with council. So if we could be more transparent and just seek out counsel for council, that would be a move in the right direction on this and other projects. So I appreciate it.
I'm just going to ask that you give us multiple versions for the meeting, various drawings based on different opinions and ideas from the community, not just one. And maybe when you bring it up, maybe don't get carried away, but a cutaway where you can move something, somebody can come up and go, I'd like to see this here, or, oh, let's try that, let's see what it looks like, you know, some sort of like the scale drawing you have, but you want to move the pickleball here, but no, somebody else wants to move it there, something like that, that we maybe be able to visually see on the map at the next go around after we have a few ideas, like, everybody likes that, but if we just made this one change, like, well, let's take this little model, is that what we're thinking about? You know, that kind of thing.
So, Mr.
Move that along the process a little quicker that way, instead of coming back with another drawing the next meeting kind of thing.
So, Mr. Mayor, what you're referring to is called a design charrette, and it might make sense to have a member of Ardura here during that next workshop, where they can just do exactly what was asked, and just relocate things real time and get community buy-in at that workshop. And
We can't do that with paper.
what's that?
We can't just do that with a piece of paper?
Well, you can, but I mean, just by moving things around,
Yeah.
do it real time. That's what I'm just an idea.
I'm sure we need to pay the expense of having a consultant come in for that, until we finalize what we want, but
They were here for both of the workshops, but staff's been taking the lead on the project presentations.
there you go. You got some direction.
All right. I think that's all I have.
All right.
My updates.
Next up is matters presented from the audience. The public may address the city council on any item that is on the agenda at the time the item is called. The public may also address the city council on any item not on the agenda that is within the subject matter of the city of Escalon. Each speaker is limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Unused time may not be yielded to another speaker. You may state your name and address for the record, however, it is not required. Due to state law, action will not be taken on an item that is not on the agenda, and except for brief responses, the council is prohibited from discussing any item not on the agenda. If it requires action, it will be referred to staff and/or placed on a future agenda. The determination of whether an item is within the subject matter of the city is a discretionary decision made by the mayor. And that, we will open up to the city, or excuse me, the room here, if you'd like to come up and speak on something.
Good evening, Sherry Hill. So I know we're on the agenda later, but this is a little different topic. So last city council, the direction from our mayor was that Justin and I could work together on details for the food, you know, with Escalon Strong's food. And by the way, we have a name, it's called the Giving Pantry. So I have a question. Would that include the ability to possibly get the code for the key that's on the community center with Justin, so that I can get in and out, or that when I'm ready to lock up the building, I can lock up the building? And, you know, if I need to get in there early to set the tables up, that I can do that in case Karen's not available. So would that include that?
I think it's going to roll into that item later on in administrative matters, I would assume, when we talk about
Okay.
the foyer and stuff.
It seems separate from me, because even if I don't use the foyer, I'm still going to, request that I would be able to get access into the building. Okay, so I'll wait and come back? Okay.
You recommended, we can't really go back and forth with this at this
That's
point.
true.
The matter's presented, so.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kurt Danziger. I've missed the last couple of meetings there, so I don't know if there's been an update on whether, excuse me, the industries are participating in our wastewater treatment plant and the cost thereof. The date for their permit is June. The last submittal to the state is December. Something needs to happen in this amount of time. If we don't have buy-in, maybe we need to fish or cut bait with the industries there so we have time to redesign Blackwater's projection for the wastewater treatment plant. Obviously, without their input, we don't need the size and scale that they've designed it to. And again, at $40 million plus, we can't afford not to have them buy in and build what we're doing now. So I know you're not going to answer those questions here, and some of you don't even care, but those dates are looming, and decision needs to be made, and it needs to be made well before June. So thank you.
Hi, Sharon Vaughn. I was glad to hear that you're moving along and going to get rid of those orchards, clean them up. My question is, we've dealt with these removal companies, and they're busy people. You know, a lot of times they don't work, they've got lots going, and it takes a while. So I want you guys to know exactly when the damage starts in our orchard, from your orchard, the navel worm orange. June. That's when our hull split comes. That's when the moths start flying. And it's not just us, it's 2 miles. So you're affecting 2 miles of orchards around each of your properties. So if possible, we'd like this to have it cleaned up before then, because it's going to cost us a lot of money again, and we may not get the grades if there's damage in there, if these orchards aren't taken out before our, because it starts from June and it goes all the way until we get our crop out of the field. The damage is going on. So I just wanted to give you that timeline. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, sure.
Randy Schmidt. So about the voting boxes, the one thing I would think is you're worried about people putting in ballots. Well, the thing I was thinking about is, I know it's really ugly, sounds like from what you guys looked at, but it seems like the safest place would be next to the police department. So, I mean, I'm afraid out at Hogan Park, I mean, there's not a lot of oversight out there. It's easy to put it there and it's easy to put it at the library, but not a lot of oversight. I realize there's a camera, but I mean, you can spray a camera and then, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like if you're thinking about, well, it's working good here, just to have them inside. The trouble is if the county decides, well, they're not doing it, so we're going to put one at Orlando's or Ace or wherever, where it isn't overseen, like close to the police department. It just seems like that might be a safer place to not risk having people put ballots in that aren't supposed to.
Anybody else? All right, with that, we'll go ahead and close matters presented from the audience. Move on to administrative matters. Item 5, annual audit report.
Thank you, Mayor. Breaking things over here. Okay, so discuss and accept the annual audit report for fiscal year 21-22. We've been waiting on this document for a while. We have it already, and I do have Michelle Gallagher with Gallagher Gatewood here to answer any questions and provide any information on this document.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Like she said, this has been a long-awaited document to be done. We want to let you know that in terms of the audit itself, it still is a good unqualified opinion on both just the audit itself, your internal controls, and the transportation report. So in terms of the audit, it is the best you can get. I know that there was some frustration on how long it took. Believe me, I'm completely frustrated as well. But once we got everything put together, it did come together pretty quickly. But unfortunately, it did take way longer than we wanted it to. There was no major changes in terms of the financial statements. There was no new notes or anything, new schedules that we had to provide. It was a pretty straightforward audit once we got the information.
Questions?
Yes. So, Ms. Gallagher, thank you for the information. I guess my overall question, not necessarily for you, but for staff and for our financial consultant, last year's audit is due next month. Will we meet that deadline?
Should be a lot quicker for the coming year for the audit being done for fiscal 22-23. We did put all the numbers together for 22-23, presented those to you in the budget that you adopted for 23-24. The only thing we needed to do was the adjustments, some of the audit adjustments that are required on an annual basis, true up the debt, true up the capital assets, which still remains to be done. Needed to finish this audit before we did that. And then a few other GASB required entries, GASB 31 if you have that, GASB 68 if you have that, GASB 75, and those are some of the things associated with pensions and OPEB, et cetera. Once all that is done, I have talked to the auditor earlier tonight before the meeting started, indicating that I needed to get a list from her as quickly as possible on what needed to be done to start the audit promptly. Once I get that list, we'll put together the state controller's report, which is required to be filed by January 31st. And I know last year it wasn't filed by January 31st for the previous fiscal year. But we'll try to get that in on an unaudited basis, and then we can go back and actually change that. But the goal will be probably within the next, I'm guessing, 4 to 5 months to have another audit before you that you can approve. Given that this audit is completed for 21-22, moving into 22-23, because I had an eye on a lot of those numbers when I put your budget together, I feel it'll be a lot more transparent and efficient in getting the information together.
And I think at the end of the day, honestly, Andy, that's all we're looking for, is getting the information way ahead of time. I mean, but I don't need to go on a rant about that, but thank you.
Yeah, so our goal right now is to get the controller's report done before the end of the month.
Appreciate that. Any other questions concerning the audit? If not, then we'll move for a motion for accepting and adopting.
I'd make a motion to accept and adopt the audit as it is right now.
Motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, item 6, discuss and possibly take action on an agenda item request from Cody Fowler proposing to add a mandate that if an agenda item is being voted on, that if at any time any member of the city council or staff recommends modification in any way, that a new public comment session be conducted prior to any vote. This is continued from December 4th.
Thank you, Mayor. This item has actually been before you guys on a few times, and we've had to work out some scheduling, but we do have Mr. Fowler in the audience. If you'd like to come up and explain anything further or provide any feedback on this item, and then council can discuss and take any action or provide direction for staff how to move forward.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's been a while since I've been up here. That's probably a good thing, isn't it? Anyways, I got to refresh myself here because it was a while that I sent that going. But on the September 5th, 2023 meeting, as I was watching the YouTube, I would believe I was not present that evening. Item 5 on that agenda was, and I quote, conduct interviews and if council agrees to make appointments to the expired seat on the San Joaquin County Commission on Aging Escalon's representative. So I'm just using this particular item as an example of sometimes that we have seen where items have been before you, they have been altered after public comment and then voted on. And that's the nature of what I'm trying to do here is in that particular example, and if you go back and look at your agenda for item 5 on September 5th of 2023, it even mentions that you were to have one representative. And if you guys recall, you ended up taking public comment, and you got public comment, you got plenty of it, but then you guys changed it after public comment, and you made a primary and an alternate. And I feel that you should have brought that back up for public comment again before you actually voted it. You did not. You shotgunned it in immediately after, Mayor, I believe it was you that had mentioned that being an option of having a primary and an alternate for that position. I don't dispute that. I mean, it is what it is. I'm just using this particular example. But you guys, if you modify that agenda item and you change the terms of that item, I believe you should bring that back out here for public comment before you vote on it. Because now it's completely different than what you've done. So essentially you needed one representative for that position, and you ended up creating 2, and you didn't go back to the public for comment. My concern is if it becomes something much more critical for the city, if you start doing that. So I'd like to see, whether it's a mandate, however you guys work that, whether you're, adding a new section to Chapter 204 or something like that. But I want to see this council bring these things back for public comment if you're going to butcher them.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Please.
So would this be like a rule change, right? Wouldn't be a mandate?
I can help respond, and then as we get into the substance, we can talk about that too, but I'll respond to that question directly. Yes, our recommendation, if you're inclined to move forward with the idea, is to do a council policy that would essentially represent how the policy would direct how the agenda would read in the future going forward. So we wouldn't necessarily have to do a full municipal code change, but we would do maybe a council policy that clarifies how the agenda is written.
Thank you. Cody, or Mr. Fowler, sorry. I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't think in that particular situation it was anything nefarious, but I do see what you're saying. I do think that obviously we work for we the people, right? We are representatives of you. So if you felt like there was an adjustment that needed to be made and the public needed another chance to come up and speak on it, I don't have an issue with that.
I think it should happen on every agenda item. I'm just using that one example because it happened to be hot in my head that night as I was watching the council meeting, because I don't want it to happen with something more critical.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I want to make sure that the council understands that if you're going to modify an agenda item from the way it was put on that agenda, then we need to have the public comment session before it's voted on, and that includes whatever modifications you want to make from the bench there. So what I want to see is if you guys want to vote and make that policy change or something, that's fine. That's just what we need to make sure that we're getting the accountability from up there out here in the audience. I mean, it's happened before, and it's going to happen again unless we hold you accountable from this side. So, yeah, let's do it. Make your policy.
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Feller. It makes total sense. It does seem that a lot of the items that we talk about up here require conversation and a compromise. And essentially what you're asking then, if we just blanket kind of put it out there, just opens up every single item to endless conversation. So before we went ahead and approved a policy change, I'd definitely like to see that written up so that that could also be presented before the audience, and we could take a look at it and make sure that we're all on the same page, aligned, and that it's mutually beneficial for our residents as well as council and staff.
And to the extent, stop me if you don't want input, but we discussed from the legal perspective what the Brown Act requires, and this would be an above and beyond kind of situation. The way the Brown Act is written is to require public comment at the outset of an agenda item, and then of course you have your general period for non-agenda items. But when it comes to an item that is on the agenda, the Brown Act provides that you have your one comment period up front, and the reason for that is so that you don't get into back and forth discussion with the audience about what does or does not constitute a modification to an item. It would be really difficult to draw that line. I think you would end up finding yourself in that situation more than maybe you initially think, that someone wants to come back up and comment every time there's any kind of a tweak made to an item. And the way that the Brown Act recommends you write your agenda items is to provide for flexibility. You don't have to, on an agenda, give every specific potential outcome that might arise, right? Because the Brown Act recognizes that the City Council is a loose, a body that has to make decisions based on sets of changing circumstances. And so you are already compliant with your comment requirements. I think, our recommendation is it would make it difficult to accurately assess. I think that it would put a higher burden on you as council members to accept comments that or maybe go off tangent of the things you're actually discussing. I think our recommendation is not necessarily to adopt the policy, just to continue to provide council with the most flexibility to have the discussions you need to have, to make the compromises you need to make. You're already compliant with the Brown Act. If you are interested in the policy, we can bring something back for you that addresses the concerns that have already been brought up. But, that's our recommendations. You direct us, but that's where we fall on it.
I struggle with, as you spoke, because that was my thought before you started to speak, is at what level and what line do you have the opening for every minor tweak? What's considered a minor or a major tweak that would institute the opening up to public comment? How do you write that in a policy? As soon as we start talking about that, how do you write this in a policy that we can follow that doesn't just destroy a meeting?
Well, let's just take my one example there, Mayor Bellinger, because
Can you just read, can you read what the agenda item was? I do have a comment on this going further, but I don't have the actual agenda item in front of me.
Okay, so it was September 5th, 2023, and it was item 5, conduct interviews, and if council agrees to make an appointment to the expired seat on the San Joaquin County Commission on Aging's Escalon representative.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things that came to mind is when I looked at the actual exhibit that was in that agenda, Exhibit A, the Commission on Aging fact sheet. Now, me as an individual, when I'm looking at this and I saw the city's agenda to conduct the interview and council make an appointment to the expired seat, 1, and then the membership qualifications on the Commission on Aging fact sheet clearly states 1 member appointed by each of the city councils on each of the incorporated municipal entity within San Joaquin County.
So I'm not.
You did 2.
I'm not speaking for you, Mr. Fowler, but.
Thank you.
I believe, and I'm completely paraphrasing this, so please tell me if I'm off base. But I think what you're asking this council is, after public comment, we changed the rules. And all you're asking is that a policy change be directed, that if we are modifying an agenda item as written, to just allow the public to comment on that one additional time. Is that correct?
Roger that. You have it correct.
Okay.
So the problem with that classification of the situation, though, is we're not allowed to change an agenda item, right? So with respect to that specific item, the argument would be it was agendized flexibly. There was one appointment made, right? There were not two appointments made to a seat that didn't exist or anything like that. What you did was slightly amend your approach to the item to say we are appointing one person, and then we're also going to have a backup because that makes sense, right? So that may be something where if you prepare a policy, you specify that it rises to the level of a change that warrants additional comment. But I think it's also an example of where it could be difficult because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where someone could claim you've actually violated the Brown Act because the return of the public comment has created a situation where you're outside of your agenda item then. So the agenda items should be written flexibly to allow you to make changes as you go if you need to, but not so flexibly that you're accounting for every, potential outcome, or that the agenda could be said to have changed so much that it no longer matches what the public was given notice of. It's a bit of a catch-22. I get that.
So my thoughts are on it that I think we need to be open to listening what Mr. Fowler is suggesting. I mean, everybody knows that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the three first words are "we the people." It's not "we the council." And
Correct.
So I think it's important to listen to what Mr. Fowler is saying, and that's where we rely on you, council, to come up with a recommendation to give us some parameters so that it doesn't create a 4-hour meeting on one particular agenda item. But I think it's important that we at least consider.
May I?
Please.
So I don't disagree with you. And I do think that that is one thing that we can continue to work on, is making agenda items that are, I guess, more flexible, open to what we're trying to discuss. I hear your I do think it's a semantic issue where you're saying seat, right, and representative. And if we had an agenda item that said we were discussing representation of our Commission on Aging, then that would have filled that instead of a representative for the seat. And if we can just make sure that we're working as council or as staff and council as city to make those more broad, I guess, so that we can fill those in different ways as we did. We did fill a seat, but it wasn't with a representative. It was with two representatives. And I understand that that's the issue at hand, but making the policy where we do bring it back every time there's a change, that does can make one agenda item very long. If we all five have an idea, that brings it back. And I think it has to do, like you were saying, more about the agenda itself, the agenda item itself, and making that broad and making that so that we can be more flexible in providing representation as opposed to a representative.
I think I would like, personally, I know everyone's got a different thought on this, but is to kind of pursue what Councilman Jeremy is talking about as far as Engel. What are our policy options so that we err on the side of the public?
So it sounds like maybe there's a thought to bring back some options.
Bring back some options. I do have a question. If you make an agenda item, it's too harsh a word to say vague, but flexible. If it's so flexible, then we would never open it up again to secondary comment. Is that accurate?
Right. I mean, I think probably the public would disagree with that characterization, because I think what he's asking is, regardless of how the agenda item, even if that agenda item had been phrased more broadly, I think maybe there still would have been a level of dissatisfaction with the fact that public comment had already been taken. Right. Then you take up the discussion, and then the public feels like, well, that's not what we thought you were going to do, right? But what I will say is that's sometimes how those items go. Right. I think this is a great example, though, and I think you're right, Councilmember, that we should continue to work on how agenda writing is an art, not a science, right? And so it is, we should continue to work on making the agenda items read in such a way that every member of the public who wants to come and comment and discuss any possible outcome, right? Because the public's always welcome to say, what their position is with respect to an item. You're limited to some extent by the Brown Act, but the public can get up and say, I see this is the item that you're discussing, my idea is X. It could be totally different than where you were going to go, right? And then you have the ability to bring that up and discuss it. So I think the question really is not, should we continue to work on making agenda items better? Absolutely, we can do that. But when you have an agenda item, whether you want to allow that secondary sort of public comment period before you take your final vote. And so what we can do is come back with some options of what that might look like.
I think it's important to get it in writing, because there's going to become a time and point that all 5 of us aren't here. We may have new city staff, and we want to memorialize this somehow. So I would ask that you put together some options. You've heard what Mr. Fowler's idea are. You've heard what council, and let's talk about it.
We can do that.
Okay.
May I just real quick? I do feel like it's important constitutionally that if we do change the agenda item like we did from a representative to representation, we probably should bring it back. We probably should say, hey, this needs to be brought to another. When we change the agenda item, which this might have been an account of, and there may have been accounts of, that should be brought back in another council meeting when we do change what we're doing in that agenda, because our community members should be able to speak to what we are going to do. And so actually thinking representation, maybe some people would have had some other ideas to bring forth too. So it is important that we stick to what we are advertising to the public that we are going to talk about. So.
Okay. You've got some direction, I guess.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 7. Discuss and possibly take action on the agenda item request from Mayor Pro Tem Hagan and Councilmember Engel regarding the use of the foyer area of the community center building for senior food distribution when the center is not in use.
Thank you, Mayor. This item was also on the last agenda back in December. We updated the paragraph at the bottom. It was basically put on this agenda for council direction and or potential action regarding use of the foyer area of the community center building for that food distribution program. And if you recall at the last meeting, in the meanwhile, because the program was moving forward, staff did work and coordinate with them to be able to use that foyer area in the meantime. And so this would just be formalizing this request in some way, shape, or form, or action.
Thoughts up here on this, folks?
I have one question. Sorry, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just going to ask Justin how he felt like it was moving along, how the interaction was going, if he saw any speed bumps or any problems.
I feel like it's going smooth.
Okay, thank you.
So my only question is on our rental schedule, are we going to now include the foyer as a possible rental area for other groups in case they want to use it?
That was brought up at the last meeting to kind of try to establish some type of fee. Currently, we're allowing that senior room to be used of no charge for nonprofits. And then we did ask them to put down a $100 deposit. Regarding the foyer, we kind of looked at 2 different ways. We looked at how we rent out our fields, where we have a 3-hour increment that has a set flat fee of $35, where maybe we create some type of increment if they're going to be there for 3 hours, do it incrementally, or you could establish some type of flat fee, which we were looking similarly, trying to match in with existing fees that we have, somewhere between the $35 to $50
Okay,
fee per use.
maybe I asked the question wrong.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm not saying charge Escalon Strong a fee.
Okay.
All I'm saying, they're feeding the people. That seems like a complete no-brainer to me. All I'm asking is, and this happens on Thursdays, what happens if somebody comes in on Monday that wants to use the foyer for signups for T-ball? They should be afforded the same opportunity. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. And so currently, because I don't have any other action at this point in time except around the senior room, if council doesn't provide any additional direction on how to move forward with that, essentially the T-ball group would come to the city and ask for that request, and then we would have them approach council and ask to be considered. That's how it would currently do. But if the council wants to make updates to that and or allow for that to occur, we can work on that. And then at the last meeting, there was discussion of trying to set up some type of fee, maybe not to be adopted, but some type of fee surrounding it. And that's what we were looking at, either trying to do it in increments or doing, a one-time daily fee, somewhere between the $35 to $50 range.
Who was allowed to rent it then? Anybody would be able to rent the foyer?
That would be
Is
up
that
to
something we
council.
really want to do?
Currently, we have
a
senior
group?
room to senior,
I would-
prioritizing
I mean,
senior.
is that something we can do to just the nonprofits that are based in Escalon and allow them use within a schedule or something? But, I'm not sure. I mean, if somebody wants to sign up for T-ball, they're more than welcome to rent the room at the library. I'm just trying to figure out, is it worth the 35 or $50 to rent the foyer out for 3 hours with a potential cleanup factor by city staff with the foyer and the restrooms, or conflict with other activities going on? I see if we put it on a fee schedule, that might create some conflicts down the road long-term. Might not be today or tomorrow, but next year, that might start down the road of problems.
And I personally think that it should be a case-to-case basis. And for instance, with the pantry giveaway that we have now is a perfect reason to have something in the foyer. But I would like people to come to a council and say why they want the foyer, because in general, with the foyer, it's not really a rentable spot. It's a spot that's indoors, but it is also the foyer to the community center. A lot more sensitive materials in the foyer, so I'd like to limit it if possible, but definitely not opposed to people using it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking and what's coming out of my mouth are two totally different things. I'm not saying add it to the fee schedule by any means. All I'm asking is if somebody else would like to use the foyer, will you as staff say, well, you don't need the large gathering room. Why don't you just use the foyer? That's my question.
But do we want to get into the point to where
Or I
people are
agree.
using the foyer because of the availability of the size, and then it's going to take away from, the being able to use the community center? I also don't want to get into that where we're cramp packing a foyer to save somebody money to be able to get in there for whatever reason.
But I agree with you. I think that we definitely do it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, Councilman Engel and Mayor Pro Tem Hagan put the agenda item in. Ms. Hill took the time to come to council, ask for approval. That same opportunity should go same way with everybody else. My point is that if somebody wants to use it, will they be able to use it?
So they are afforded the same ability if they so choose. We're talking about, are we adding the ability to rent the foyer? Sorry, America, foyer, I'm sorry. The foyer is not, in my opinion, a rentable space. We're providing our citizens with a service by providing free food and goods to them, which is of benefit to them. It's not for profit. Any other agency, nonprofit, could come before the council and ask for permission, and then we get to take a look at it. But should we just offer it up for rent? No, I think it bypasses the ability for us to have revenue. Why wouldn't they use that for $50 instead of the large room when it was much more expensive? The town's small. We're making an exception to help our residents. I think this has just become way much more than it needs to be. It's my opinion, as stated in the last one, we're allowing a nonprofit agency to provide a free service that's beneficial to our residents and to their families. It's not about money, it's about helping our community. If someone else would like to also be afforded that same opportunity, they can follow the same path, bring it to council, ask to have it put on the agenda. We can take a look at it and judge that on a case-by-case basis. But I will soundly say, I do not believe that it should be offered as an additional rental space.
Would agree with that.
I'm going to step out for the vote.
Okay. First, you can say for the public comment, probably.
I'm sorry?
We should open this up for public comment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's open it up to the public out here and come to the podium and have a chat.
Hello again, Sherry. So I didn't mean to have this be a major, big, huge thing. The use of the foyer is actually not because I want to use the foyer necessarily. What I'm trying to avoid is upsetting and abusing the senior room and that room. And the foyer works perfectly for what we're doing. I think it's a really unique circumstance. I mean, it's how many people are giving out food. It's really easy to contain. They go in one door and out. They're not using the restrooms. They're not using any part of the facility. I'm not upsetting, the tables that are already pre-set up with all of the supplies. So that's what the purpose of the foyer was to avoid upsetting the senior room, avoid touching things and having people come in and touch things that they shouldn't be touching in the senior room, touching possessions, touching food. Karen puts a lot of her personal expense into that room, and she puts out food at her personal expense, and people can pick it up if you walk into the room. So the whole idea was try to be a better neighbor, a better community member, and, okay, how can I make this work? How can I make this easier for everyone? Not step on anybody's toes, not upset, a senior group that's going. Half of my crew actually attends lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays because all of my volunteers are seniors, which is why they're not here, because it's really late. Just saying. It's past their bedtime, mine too. Anyway, so that's why the foyer came, because my mind is not like most people's. I can see a whole bunch of different options and things. I mean, we even used the courtyard once because the chamber had the auditorium. Had I known it was the chamber, we could have used the foyer because we work really well with the chamber, and they would have said, oh, no problem, because we're not using it right now. I didn't have that information. I just knew we had a conflict, and so within a split second, okay, let's set it up in the courtyard because the weather was okay for the food, we were okay. And it worked, because I will make it work. Wherever you put me, I will make it work. It's just easier in the foyer. Much, much easier. And everybody's happy and nobody's upset, nobody's going, but what if you? So that's all. Then on another note, since I couldn't say this earlier, it would be really helpful if I could get access so that I can set the tables up, and then I stay late and set the tables down, and I clean, and if I don't have to worry about having to have somebody else come down and lock and unlock, I can make sure that it's clean and, lock it up and everything. So if I would be afforded that opportunity to be able to get in and out of there on Thursdays, and possibly if we have another day, I would work with you. Sometimes we did have 2 one week, and that was wonderful. So that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
What is our current policy on access to keys? I know we don't give them out, but we do have a keypad with a key in there, I understand. What's our normal policy for other folks that use it? As far as consistency, does our policy allow for doing what she's asking? How does this work?
Currently, the key pad is a relatively new thing that we just incorporated in the last few months. I don't know if you want to.
And maybe if that can help too, but we have provided the key code to our instructors, karate, others who instruct, to be able to get into the facility when we don't have staff available. Is there anything else there?
They are required to sign a key agreement. They have the code, that the code is only for their use. That allows staff to have control over who is in and out of the community center.
Is it specific when they sign those agreements to days they use it, or, and therefore if we deviate, there's communication to do that? Is that keypad an electronic?
No,
that, or is
it's
it-
toggle, it's a move
It's old,
toggle.
old
so it-
toggle, okay,
Mhm.
old school then?
Yeah, 4-digit,
I was just curious, because if it was electronic stuff, you can do lots of interesting programming
yeah.
for dates and times and windows and whatnot for different folks.
We are moving towards that direction in the future, installing that on the door to where we can have more code types like that. We don't currently have that, but we are leaning towards that direction.
Where's more control and security-wise on that?
Correct.
Just to make it clear, and jump in if I'm wrong, this is more like the real estate lockbox
Yep.
where you can
Yeah.
enter the code, get the key in. What Justin is referring to is something we are exploring right now, looking at various options to have a truly keyless remote entry into, and then we can provide, the code to those who rent, to instructors, to others
Codes
as,
expire after
as we-
use and
yep.
those kinds of things?
as we
Yeah, it'd be designated to the period of time they're allowed to rent
Right,
the facility.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I like the direction you're going with that.
Sherry, are you there sometimes before 8 o'clock and after 5 o'clock?
No.
Okay.
No. The food, the way that we are gathering food, it's typically in the middle of the day. So if I am ever there after 5 o'clock, it's because I don't see that, no.
Okay.
I really don't, no. The latest we've been there was, I think it was 4:45, and that's because our truck had an issue that day, and the delivery where we have to go pick up in Stockton had an issue that day, and I was sweating bullets because I thought, oh my gosh, we got to get out of here, and it was, by the skin of my teeth. But typically, we're out of there by 2:30, 3 o'clock.
It just seems to make sense to me. If Justin's good with it, ultimately his staff would have to be the one that's manning that. It sounds like we already have an agreement process in place. We're working on something better that could be individualized, and it takes stress off of staff. If Justin's crew's busy fixing some major water issue, they don't have to worry about breaking away to come take care of a key issue from a trusted community member that essentially signed an agreement saying that they were responsible for, I'm not sure what the agreement says, but I'm sure for damages or loss. Hopefully, yes? It includes damages and loss? Okay.
So we just follow, so basically we can help this group, if we follow the current key agreement and policy and everything, we can make that happen without making any extra decisions tonight. We just work through that, staff can work with Escalon Strong and work through that, correct? Okay,
We need to vote on this
nope,
item?
I don't believe.
No, what I would say is you've given direction to staff to work at the staff level, so that works.
We just need to discuss the recommendation on the item request.
Thank
If
you.
we're gonna allow the use of the foyer for this group specifically. Any more discussion from folks in the audience or any more up here? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public comment and bring it back here for either action on this or any more discussion or thought.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to allow Escalon Strong to use the foyer on Thursdays to help with their food distribution program to our community.
Would you be interested in amending that in case they get their food on Wednesday and not specify a day? Just to clarify
Okay, I'm
that,
gonna-
take off the Thursday maybe?
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to allow Escalon Strong the use of the foyer of the community center for their food distribution program when the center is not in use.
All right,
I will second.
so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Looks like 4-0 on that one. Thank you very much. Can we get Mayor Pro Tem back in the room?
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you for a loop with the day.
I was like, they might get the food on another day. We might want to not specify that window in the motion.
Don't leave Betty.
All right, item number 8. Consider and possibly take action on the nonprofit organization applications for reduced fees for the use of city facilities.
Thank you, Mayor. So this item before you, council adopted an ordinance years back establishing guidelines regarding the requirements for organizations applying for reduced fees for city facilities. Included in the guidelines is that the city council is to approve all applications for nonprofit status. We've listed the guidelines of the ordinance and that council must approve those for the nonprofit status, which includes the nonprofit rates listed in our schedule of fees. We have attached the organization applications that were received to make this meeting. That doesn't necessarily mean that if a group that has nonprofit status wants to rent the center, that they still can't submit an application and come before council for review. But this is something we do annually. Unless council wants it to be a different way, in past practice, it has been that, if another group comes forward and is interested in getting that rate, we have allowed them in the past to submit an application and come before council individually for a case-by-case potential action. So the Lions Club, Escalon Lions Club applied, Escalon Wrestling Club, Escalon Chamber of Commerce, Escalon Strong, Heritage Church, the Escalon Historical Society and Museum, Escalon Sunrise Rotary Club, American Legion Post 263, and the Van Allen Parent Teacher Club. And so all of their applications have been included. And if you have any questions, let us know.
I do. It's probably for council. Council, since I am on the board of one of these clubs, do I need to recuse myself?
The recusal rules are for when you have a financial interest. So unless you feel that you can't vote fairly as a result of your position with the board, as long as you don't have a financial interest in that position, then you're welcome to vote or to recuse yourself voluntarily, but it's not required.
Thank you.
I have a question of staff. How did we advertise this process to receive these responses back from these groups?
We put out a letter to all of the nonprofit agencies that the city is aware of. They've either done business with us, have a completed business license, which nonprofits complete business licenses but don't pay fees on them. So they're typically on the record in some way, shape, or form with the city as being a nonprofit and sending out this notice. And ones in the past that would typically apply for this application. I don't know if you have anything further to add to that.
I guess I feel like we're missing the boat on some additional groups. And if they've never done business before within the city, are they aware of the process? That's my only concern. You and I have talked about, for example, the Dent PTO. Are they aware that this is the process? And similarly, earlier this week, we did a massive blast on social media for the Poet Laureate program. Why aren't we doing something similar, calling for all nonprofits on social media? Hey, now's the time for the application process. Get your application in. I mean, that's creating openness and transparency. I fully support all of these groups, nothing against these groups, but I think we need to do a better effort to make everybody aware within the community. And you know what? We may do all of this and might not get any applications, but at least we're making the community aware of this is how you do it.
Do that.
So just for clarification, so we have this list, they're gonna all qualify and be given this status for the community center
For the year.
for the year. So some other group that meets all of the qualifications on the guidelines that we have here to get that discounted rate, they meet all of those requirements, they're gonna, if they're not on the list, and they choose to make an application, this policy still says they have to come to our council for approval at that point, because we're outside the window of
Correct.
vetting them at this point during the process.
Correct. This is the time where they'd be approved for the year, so if it comes
Right.
before council, they're approved. So at any time, if Dent PTO approaches the city and wants to rent the community center, at that time, we can advise them, which we have with nonprofits. If you're a nonprofit, you can go before council and ask for the discounted rates. Because typically nonprofits do ask for discounted rates.
Right.
A lot of agencies provide that to nonprofits, so that's one of the first thing they tell us. We're a registered nonprofit. Okay, we want these rates. Okay, in order to get these rates, we'll have you fill out the application, you have to go to council. So we would let them know ahead in advance that it's something they need to do. The application itself isn't too hard to complete. And a lot of the documentation attached to them are things that can be, like their IRS clearance letter and stuff, are actually things that can be pulled off.
I guess the question is I'm just trying to get because this is specific to Escalon.
Correct.
Why does it need to come back to council if they meet all of the requirements in this ordinance? Why do we have to come to council for that requirement? If they truly meet those 8 to 10 bullet items, staff is fully available and capable of vetting that process. Why does it have to come back to council at all? If they're within the 95320, they're doing great, they're making these 3 examples in the last 3 years, they're doing all this. Why are we requiring them to come to council at all? Approve them and move on. I don't understand the extra step, the need for us to see it again at that point. That's my opinion. There's no reason for making this process so difficult that, hey, I just heard you guys got approved. Oh man, I wish we could have. Now they got to go through the process. We got to put them on the agenda. We're going to burn them for a month minimum before they get in front of us to approve it. But if they meet those items on the bullet item, 8 or 9 items, process it. It's administrative duty. It's not something that we need to administratively see here at the council level, in my opinion. I don't understand. I mean, I might be off base on this, but it seems like a burdensome process for a nonprofit trying to do good in our community.
Makes sense.
But that's, I mean, if they don't meet it and they still want it, then they can come to council and argue their point. We hit 6 of the 10 or whatever they want. They can argue that. We're new, whatever. At that point, bring it to us. But if they hit all the bullet items, why are we taking up council and chamber time with everybody here?
Do you think that we even need to review this list every year? I mean,
I think so legally we should for
So-
the nonprofit status myself.
What I would say is that a lot of this is coming straight from the ordinance, right? So one thing for sure that you would need, even if there is a consensus to move that direction, you'll need an ordinance to amend your current ordinance, because you can't, sort of piecemeal strike. But it would save you a lot of time in the future. So what we could do, and let me know if there's consensus on this, is bring back an ordinance that amends the existing ordinance to say it happens at an administrative level, as long as they check the boxes. So it's essentially ministerial, right? It's not a discretionary action at all, but check these boxes. Staff will approve your application whenever it comes in, and then there could be an appeals process set out where if you disagree with staff's characterization of your application, you can come to council. But that way you get 90% of them taken care of administratively, but you would have to change the ordinance.
like it. I think we should look at the gaining more applications too. I mean, can you screw up just a little bit? So obviously, Escalon Lions Club, the Wrestling Club, Chamber, they know the process. What about everybody else, the other groups in town that don't know the process? I mean, this council has made it very clear we're about transparency and openness. So I think we should do a social media blast and say, hey, if you want to get on the nonprofit list, submit your application. Cutoff is January 31st. And then move forward. And then that becomes by January 31st, if you're a City of Escalon nonprofit, you know you need to apply. You're on the list. I mean, I fully support what Mayor Bellinger is saying. It seems, why do we have to get so
keep us out of the weeds?
Process-driven.
It looks like we, obviously we're still gonna have to move forward on this item, but I think we should explore some options to make this more administrative and take it out of our hands if they meet the requirements. Anytime during the year, they get 365 days based on the day they submit it. Move on, just, they're on file, but that's my opinion.
Mayor, may I?
But please.
But as we do the renewals, and we do the renewals in January of every year, those that join in the middle would also get those renewals. And if I could request that we do get a list when they are renewed in January, I would love to see who does fall on our nonprofits on that yearly basis and maybe who's fallen off. We don't need to actually put those, but as a comparison, see who is actually renewed for that year so that we can be aware who's still current.
Let's open up the chambers here and have some folks from the audience if they have something they'd like to speak on this item. Please come up to the podium.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's on record that I'm on the board for Escalon Strong. There is no financial gain from it.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
As long as you feel like you can make a fair decision, you don't have the
I mean,
financial conflict.
Yeah, in this situation, I can. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
Just from a historical view from past councils, which I happen to be part of this one when they passed this ordinance, there are nonprofits, and then there are nonprofits. What we looked at the time when it was originally structured is does that nonprofit give back to the community? Now, if you've got one of those, great, boom, no problem. But if you're a nonprofit that doesn't do anything but meet, and it's a social situation where they don't do anything for the community, well, then I don't think they were, or at council at that time, didn't think they were deserving of a cut rate. So that's why it is what it is, and you guys can do with it as you wish.
Well, thank you for that.
You all haven't been around long enough to know how this all started. So I'll give you a little more historical perspective. During the economic downturn, the city was looking to make revenue generation a priority. So the council questioned why are we charging so little for our community center, which is a loss. Hence, this process started. The process moved farther along, as former Mayor Haskin said. When you're saying 95320, it was just the city proper, because you got people from Farmington School District that wanted to use it that don't, put any value into Escalon, and so they were ruled out. That's why you had that. I'd be questioning whether you want to open this up to all 95320 and make it an asterisk there that anybody outside the city does come to you, and you guys make the judgment there, because if all they're going to do is check off boxes in 95320, they may let somebody in that's not really adding any value to the community. So a little historical perspective for neophytes that are sitting in judgment areas. Thank you.
Could we add that as one of the
Excuse
bullet
me,
points?
can somebody tell me what a neophyte is? I'm sorry, just so I know how we were just referenced.
Newbie, essentially.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
I have a lot of customers from Collegeville and Farmington, and so they pay taxes at my store. So 95320, I mean, yeah, they're not from Escalon, but they buy stuff here. So I totally agree with David Bellinger about that if they're 95320 and their service community, a service organization, nonprofit, that it shouldn't have to go back to council. And I don't think you'll have to look for these people so much as you think, because if I'm a whatever club I am, church, club, and I want to use the community center, then I will come to the city and ask what can I get a rate? I mean, I would automatically do that. I think most nonprofits will approach the city if they think they're going to have something there. If they're not going to have something there, they're not going to care about if you run ads. I mean, if they don't have something in mind that they're going to use the community center for anyway. So I think people will automatically just do it if they're,
Yes.
anyway. I agree with you that it should be a staff.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience tonight? All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment on that. Back to council here. So on the agenda, for current recommendation on the agenda is to consider approval of the organizational applications for reduced fees. So outside of, because we can't change the ordinance to make any changes currently, I guess we need to move on to item 9 first before we consider something else.
Yeah, I would make a motion to accept it how it is. And we can research the stuff you're looking into for a future meeting.
So just to clarify, the motion is to accept this item as presented for the organizations that have filed their applications as a collective, yes to all of those. Okay, and then we can, we hear direction to staff to consider social media, blasts and things like that in the future, which doesn't need to be part of the motion as long as there's consensus on that. And then, yeah, we can come back and make sure there's consensus on the update to the ordinance, but we could take that motion as just approval of these applications tonight if that was the intent.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. So side note, I'd like to ask for direction for the staff to possibly look at amending the ordinance in some fashion and work with legal on how we might be able to make this more administrative process and bring back some options and ideas to us at a later date here.
Okay.
It's
great, we
not
can do
a
that.
rush item, but sometime in the next quarter, I would think. So we can have some items on that.
Perfect.
That's agreeable to everybody else anyways.
Yes.
I don't want to speak for everybody, but that's my thought. We good?
Fantastic.
All right, so I guess some direction. Last item, number 9. Discuss and provide direction regarding a city service and maintenance community facilities district for the new development projects only, and discuss options for the development of a CFD to help fund essential city services based on the impact of the new development.
Good evening,
French.
Mayor, members of the council, Jalen French. The item before you is an item that was raised at the December 16th meeting, I believe, the last meeting in December for the council. And at that time, council asked for additional input on what similar CFDs or what other CFDs look like. So we will get into that specifics. What I want to do is reset the conversation a little bit. One of the council goals adopted in the budget is to explore outside or other revenue sources to help the city's overall fiscal stability and sustainability. Obviously, we know what's generally happening in the economy, and then more locally, what happened with one of our large sales tax producers. And so fiscal sustainability has been on the forefront of everyone's mind, I think. Made even a little bit worse in California, since Prop 13, really all cities struggle with providing the services that they have based on the revenue being generated. So in 1982, state of California adopted basically a CFD Act, a Community Facilities District Act, which allows basically an assessment on your property tax to help fund services, either direct services or services outside of the actual district. So the council, that's the reset. The council asked staff to research several CFDs kind of in the area and around and provide that information. So we did look at 6 different communities ranging in size from 2,100 people, give or take, significantly smaller than the city of Escalon, to a population of 90,000, significantly bigger than the city of Escalon, ranging from Stanislaus County, a couple in Stanislaus County, all the way to Riverside. So try to get a broad swath of the various CFDs. So if you look at the cost range, it's a big margin. For a single family residential, in the 6 that we looked at, range anywhere from $360 a year to $1,880 a year. The average of the 6 is $810. Again, that's per year, per unit, per parcel. And the median, kind of the one that falls in the middle, $710. For multifamily, which was a topic of discussion, again, big range, $200 to $1,200 per year, average $600, median $560. 5 of the 6 do have established rates for commercial and industrial, so not just residential of the ones that we looked at. And 5 of the 6 also provide services outside of the CFD boundary, police, fire, paramedic, those types of services that aren't just localized within the district boundary, but really are for the broader city. I think what has come out in the research is there's no typical CFD. The CFD depends on, and the cost associated depends on the number of services that are being provided within. You will see, on my list at least, there are CFDs that are set up for just police and fire, for instance, and there are others that are set up for many maintenance type services, street lights, streets, sidewalk, landscaping, walls, graffiti abatement, mosquito abatement. Really, there's, you know, a litany of items there that are covered. So it really comes down to the number of services that are looking to be provided, the cost of those services, and the proportional share of each parcel. And then, to a lesser extent, the length of time that the CFD has been established. I think all of them have inflators, you know, based on CPI, consumer, just lost the P, huh?
Price index.
Thank you, everyone. Consumer price index, and so they do have an inflation rate that is added on to them, and so, you know, the more years, the more those will increase. But the goal there is to keep up with inflation, so city services aren't increasing in cost, and what is being offset in revenue is not being so. So that is, you know, kind of in a nutshell, the research that we found across the 6 agencies, and I guess I can share those with you, what those are. City of Houston, Stanislaus County, City of Oakdale, Stanislaus County, City San Juan Bautista, City of Hemet, City of Lake Elsinore, and City of Montclair. So those are the ones that we looked at.
What was Houston's and what was Oakdale's?
Houston's for a single-family resident is $1,156 per single-family residential parcel per year. And then Oakdale had a range, a couple of different subdivisions, each had different ones, anywhere between $1,077 per year to $1,880 per year for single-family residential parcel.
They all had escalators on those?
They do.
Okay, and are any of those have sunsets, or is it in perpetuity?
Most are in perpetuity because they provide an ongoing service. So as long as that service is being provided, the CFD would be provided. There are infrastructure-based CFDs, and so that would sunset after the bond was paid off or that improvement was fully paid off. All the ones that we looked at are service CFDs.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
A quick question. Is this true or not? It's something I've heard. This is something that if say you're doing like a residential, you know, I don't know, development of some sort, and is it true that 51% of them, if they were to vote, can opt out of this?
No.
That's what I've heard, so I don't know if it's true or not.
So the way these are established generally because of voting rules is on new development. So when a developer or property owner is moving forward in the process, you establish the CFD, that property owner votes to approve it, and there's one vote. Now, if you were to go back and do a CFD on a certain neighborhood that's already developed, or, you know, citywide, for instance, you'd have to have, I believe it's 2/3 vote, is that correct? You'd have to have a 2/3 vote of those existing residents. So that's why specifically the item states for new development.
Okay, so hypothetically, if you did it for a town, like an area of our town that didn't have this already, they could opt out of it through a 2/3 vote?
Maybe, I just want to pick on opt-out. They could choose to accept it, have it, or not. So there wouldn't be an opt-out, there would be a yes or a no.
Okay, so it would happen up front then?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So if we were to put this into a policy for new development, this would be something that'd be analyzed and approved and would be in the new development for a subdivision before they were allowed to get their building permits. Then it's guaranteed to be in there if we did this.
Correct.
There's no opt out of this. It's an ordinance that all new development would have something like this, and there would have to be some calculations based on those developments, how much that fee would be, and you would have to come up with a schedule for that, I would assume.
Correct. So to your first part of the question, yes, it would become a part of the entitlement, the approval process that the city undertakes. So the, requirement, just like anything else, would be to establish a CFD. And, I happen to have Houston's on top here. There would be a report produced by a consultant that would outline the type of services being provided, the cost of those services, and the proportional share across the residential parcels in that area. And then that would be brought forward each year and adopted by the city council, much like the LLDs and LMDs.
This take place of the landscape lighting district type stuff in new development? Is that
In new development, yes.
In new development, those would go away and it would be replaced with the CFD then?
Correct.
Do any of those actually generate surplus revenue, or are they just strictly to cover expenditure?
They are intended to cover the cost of services being brought on by the new development. They are not intended to generate excess revenue.
Do they?
I would say no. I mean, to answer your question directly, I would say no.
Jalen, how would this affect the applications that are already submitted?
I think that would be up to council's discretion. If it was an entitlement, part of the entitlement process, those who are through the process or largely through the process, I don't think that would be just to add them. Those that are in process and aren't to, kind of an approval level from the city, I think depending on council's direction could be included. Council could also direct, any future non-submitted application from, the date of approval, for instance.
I guess the reason why I ask is, and I mentioned this at the previous meeting, there are some applications currently going through the process, and those developers have already determined a cost for their projects. And I guess my question is it really fair now to spring this CFD on them, which just drives the cost of the project up? So not necessarily a question for you, but for the council, just something to consider.
I guess my question would be is how does it drive up the developer's cost? It's a pass-through to the people who are buying the product. It's not a necessarily a hard cost to the developer that you can put a line on them to, because it's a pass-through cost. It's like a sales tax. It's property tax, it's the same thing.
Okay, so for example, Weldway, their application, they know what the cost of their project is right now, and it's not based, so they've gotten a loan or got information, and they determine the project is $5 million. And now we're coming on with this CFD. Now the cost of the project is going up.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
So residential projects would function differently than commercial projects if the applicant is also the long-term owner in the commercial or industrial project. So in a residential project, it is most likely a pass-through because you have a developer, this CFD is set up, and it becomes on the property tax roll thereafter. And so that would then be a pass-through from the developer to the residential unit and the residential homeowner or landlord. A commercial property or industrial property, if there's, a CFD and the applicant is the owner, they would be then paying that property tax.
And then in turn, it trickles down because then they would have to increase rents or something in order to cover the additional cost of the establishment and the CFD, correct?
Yeah, I mean, rents, if they're the owner, then there's no rents, but yeah, that would be an additional cost on their property tax each year. Now, the other thing that was mentioned at the last meeting and should be factored in here is there is a cost to form the districts. themselves. Again, we received an estimate of about $25,000 to produce the first document, establish the first boundary. It's a rate and method document that needs to prepare. So there's some work that needs to go into it. Again, about $25,000. I have seen cities pass that cost on to development, in that if there was no new development, we wouldn't need this, and so that should be a cost borne by development. I've also seen cities take on that cost because, it's really kind of something that the city is doing for itself. So that is an upfront cost that would be associated with just establishing the district, and then there's subsequent. So let's say we form the first one, the city forms the first one. Each subsequent new development would need to form its own district, basically annex into the citywide boundary that was established as part of the first one. So there are some upfront costs in that way. Those are probably, the subsequent ones are probably 6, 8, 10,000. So those are costs that need to be considered as well.
Have we done any forecasting, what this would do to the general fund?
Not directly in numbers, but it would help offset the costs, right? It would help offset our burden from the general fund for providing these services.
My question is, do you have, I guess I'd like to see or understand more about how do you calculate, say, a subdivision of 100 homes, they're being built. It's the first one. We've grandfathered in projects currently in play, let's say. Somebody else comes into town and in another year, the first one out, 100 houses. How do you go about determining how much police force, fire, streets, landscape, lighting is required for quote-unquote 100 houses? Is it just a percentage of the number of houses in the community and what our budget is, and you assume that's a percentage of the budget and that's what it's going to go up, basically? Is that how we're doing that?
Basically, look at, total cost, across the number of residents now, the cost across, the new residents and what that share of each house is in essence.
Yeah, so X number of houses, this is what the cost is, divided per house is roughly this cost. Therefore,
For the increment that's being added, yes, not the entire thing.
Okay. What action are we looking for tonight? Direction? Is that what we're looking for?
If you'd like to take public comment, Mayor, before.
Yeah, I was just asking to see what we're going for tonight before we do that.
So I think consistent with one of the stated council goals, staff is bringing forward for your consideration an alternative revenue generating model. And I would say staff is looking for direction on whether it's something council does want to consider, does not want to consider, or wants to consider in a modified fashion based on what has been provided in the two staff reports thus far.
Any other discussion here? Okay, we'll open it up to the room then. Anybody would like to come to the podium and discuss this topic, you're free to come up.
I just have a question. In the beginning, you were talking about, you were kind of assessing dollar amounts, like between big cities, and was there any consideration in that to moderate, medium income? Like certain cities are like San Francisco, people are wealthy, Escalon, not so much. I mean, is there consideration to that when you start looking at that?
Not directly, right? There's no consideration for the median income directly in the documents. Where that does factor into the cost to provide services in San Francisco compared to the cost to provide services in Escalon is different. And so that's where, since it's a proportional indication of the cost to provide services, that's where your question would come in.
Because I'm just thinking about, because you're going to raise each household, a certain amount of money, and do Escalon people versus, when you're looking for that amount that you're gonna raise it. Income is kind of important when you're gonna raise people's.
Absolutely. And I think important to reiterate here is this would be on new development, and therefore any new buyer or commercial industrial development coming in would know in advance, what the cost of that CFD would be.
If they can afford the house, they can
Yes.
afford the. Okay.
Correct.
Taxes. I've heard many of you up there, the little fact that, taxes and mandates and what have you is a crux. I'm just interested to see how you're going to handle that. The question was asked a little earlier, how does this going to marry with a landscape lighting district in a residential neighborhood? So any new this is low-hanging fruit, by the way. To get a vote on this, you just need one for that developer. So when you put in 100 homes, you only have one developer. He cannot develop unless he agrees to the conditions here. So let's make sure that that you're throwing this on to a group of people that had no idea that it was coming. Although you want to buy, you want to buy. And I'm all for revenue generation. I have a pension, and it's paid for by revenue generation. So I just want to point out, is that going to be a consideration? Are you going to have overlapping landscape lighting districts, landscape maintenance districts, special districts like over in the estates, in addition to the CDF?
I don't believe so at this time. LLDs were a mechanism used. CFD is a, I don't want to say more modern mechanism, but a more flexible mechanism that can cover more services. So any new development, should the council choose to move forward with this way, would have a CFD, and that would cover everything that needed to be covered, or the council side.
And not a landscape lighting district.
Yeah, it would be in lieu of a landscape and lighting district.
Okay, that's important, because when you look at all of the services that were outlined here, the majority of those are landscape lighting district. The things that you don't see in an LLD, excuse me, is police. You have a fire district that's not Escalon's fire department, it's Escalon's fire district, so that's not included. That's a separate line item on the property taxes, as is the mosquito abatement. So you have fixed costs for lighting, the cost of that lighting, the electricity to run sprinklers, the water for the sprinklers for the parks, any of the masonry brick walls that are sound walls, and monument buildings. Those are all being paid for currently with landscape lighting districts. So I'm talking about the fees here. So when you go look at this thing, you have to put it in perspective for all of the fees that you look at all year long. So in January, typically you get AB 1600 review. That's all the connections, city connections, police, fire, what have you, review all of those fees for that are put on developers, when they want to build something. And every year there's how come these fees are that way? How do we justify these things? And every year, as well, we've had fee studies, and these are the fees that came out of that fee study. And we're not even charging all the money that we could be charging for those fee studies. So I want you to put in perspective, when those fees come up, that you bring, for revenue generation purposes, bring those fees back up to where they should be, keep them there, and then don't hold those discussions anymore. People are going to come to you all the time and say, oh, those, the park fees, we want to prorate those. We want to cut these things in half. No. You want to do business here, you're going to pass through things like this, don't be lowering those other fees. Those are important to the city. They're lifeblood. That's what all these things are for. So there isn't an argument here being brought up by industry saying, hey, more fees, it's going to be harder for us to attract businesses here because now there's more cost here than there is in XYZ city. So you haven't heard that argument yet. I just want you to put all those things in perspective when you're looking at fees and how they actually do affect. Thank you.
Sure. just a different viewpoint. So you're all representing government, and I'm representing not government. When we passed Prop 13, yes, I was alive. Not everybody was. California has a way, government has a way of overriding people's wishes and what we vote for and what we ask for, and coming up with creative ways to circumvent by creating new laws that allow them to do what we asked you not to do. For example, this is dumb. 3 years ago, California said we are done with daylight savings time. Guess what? We're still changing our clocks. That's really simple. So it's just an example. I'm not telling you not to do this. I'm just saying consider that Prop 13 and other things were put into place to help families. So $100, or rather 100 homes at $1,000 a year, is that $100,000? But for a family buying a home, that might change their minds from buying a home in Escalon. So just something to consider.
Anybody else? Or we'll go ahead and close public comment. I mean, I think that's something we have to consider too, is are we looking at just residential? Are we looking at just commercial? We're gonna do both? Not gonna do either one? That's, you know, lots of options. It's not just all or nothing here, so.
Mr. Mayor, I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
First one is for staff. Have we talked to Florsheim about this possibility? And what's their take?
Yes, we have directly and indirectly talked to Florsheim. Most, I can say it, and I feel justified in saying this, most development in most cities now expect a CFD. I think that was mentioned by our city attorney at the last meeting, mentioned by staff at the last meeting as well. They are not shocked or surprised by a potential inclusion of a CFD into new development.
And my other question is for Andy Finance. In other cities that you have worked in, what have you seen CFDs do for the financial health of cities and municipalities?
The only jurisdiction I've worked with that actually incorporated CFDs as part of their financing strategy was Placer County. So it was the county as a whole, and that county is growing extensively. So there's a lot of undeveloped area in the unincorporated county, and the majority of the developments that were coming in, and I'm talking 13,000 to 20,000 homes, did have CFDs behind them, which the county got behind and actually assisted them in implementing.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Please.
I just expressed my opinion. I spoke about it a little bit at the last meeting. I believe that we should adopt CFDs, residential only, that we should place them 6 months to 1 year out from inception, which would incentivize developers to hurry up and get applications in if they wanted to essentially bypass that, right? If there was a date, it is effective January 1, 2025. Any applications prior to that will be outside of that policy, jurisdiction, code, what would we call it? Requirement. Okay. That may prompt those people to hurry up and start their application process, which generates fees for us, which helps us evaluate the housing element, right? It kind of helps us to see where we are as far as that's contributing. Also, as far as increased taxes, yeah, I said it. I don't want to increase taxes, but more importantly, I don't want to increase folks who already live here's taxes. Now, if you want to move here, or if you have the ability to upgrade your home and to move into one of those, that's a little bit different. But what it does do is it offsets the rest of our taxes. So when that person buys that home, we're not experiencing the burden to help pay for the services that go to their home. They're paying for the services that go to their home, which helps us, which helps keeps people not choosing to live in that development, taxes down. Is that fairly accurate, correct, safe to say? And that's kind of where I'd stand. As far as industrial or commercial development, I think it could be an impairing factor to draw business here, and that's opposite of what we're trying to do. So I think the first place to start would be residential and leave commercial and industrial development out of it. That's where I stand.
I would agree with Councilman Engel with one exception, and that is have the inception date coincide with budget years. So, for example, July 1, 2024. I don't know how quickly we could turn that around, but then that would also show this council as far as when we're planning next year's budget with this, if the establishment of the CFD goes through, then this is what we can anticipate into the general fund. So to coincide with the fiscal years. And I would 100% agree, looking at it more from a single-family home, not necessarily multifamily or commercial or industrial.
Your thoughts or direction we'd like to give to staff? Any other thoughts? I can say I generally agree that as a test to give it a try. I think residential is the first place to go. Put it on the homeowners that are purchasing the homes as part of that. I'm not sure how fast we could turn around this process to be able to say it's effective July 1st of the new budget. I think that's too quick. If anything, I'd almost go out to 25 July if we wanted to keep it on a budget year. So either July of 25 or January 1, 25 would be my thought, depending on how long we take to get something implemented. Because if it's going to take us 3 to 6 months to get the CFD process going, we can't really start taking clock on that on developers until they know exactly what they're looking at. It's hard for us to tell them what's going to happen if you don't get it in the next time period, if they don't have that policy written up. What would it take to get something like this written up, you think? What's the timeline on that? Because we'd have to run it back through us.
I don't think it's a months and months and months process. We would have to, if we choose, go out to RFP, get a consultant, have the consultant prepare the document. So, 2 months for RFP, probably 3 months for document preparation. Let's call it 5 months, 6 months maybe is my best guess estimate. Bring it forward to the council, 5, 6, 7 months is my guess.
And that's the $25,000 that we would be spending with this obligation if we so chose to go that way. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just jump in there. As far as it applies to fiscal year, it wouldn't matter this go round. The development would still have to have their application in, which is their fees at that point would be the only part that would influence our budget, because the rest of it would be development and sales, which would be a process.
Right.
It wouldn't happen. So if we were looking at having something like this effective January 1, 25, we're still not going to recognize revenue from that probably until 26, if not later.
True. You don't know how long the project takes to get off the ground. Yeah.
And then get sold.
Yeah. I want to kind of hit on one point, just make it clear. Sounds like maybe a couple different things we're talking about. One, the kind of go live date. So any new application after the go live date is subject to the CFD, and then how long it takes to establish. So since these are generally developed upon new development, let's say we set a policy a year out, we may not have, we may not have new development. And so it would be hard for staff if we didn't have sort of a pending project to say, this is what the CFD is going to look like, here's why we're forming it, here's how we're forming it. So I would just I want the council to be aware of that. But if we have a couple projects in the pipeline and we say, yes, this is something we would like to do, then staff has information to be able to bring forward that says, here's what these developments would look like, and here's the timing of the CFD.
Mr. Mayor, can I say? Residential makes sense from what Jeremy's saying, but the businesses, commercial type stuff, I think would be a mistake. That's how I see it. I think it would really potentially just add more red tape and essentially at some point affect our sales tax.
Agreed.
I guess the question is too, I don't know. I'm thinking of the Florsheim. It took us how many years to get that property into our sphere of influence so they could actually do that. I don't want to saddle them with this. They've patiently waited. We've had their money for a decade or more. So I don't really want to say when they're going to bring that project to bear, but it's within the next 2 years, they shouldn't have to be subject to this. We've held up their project with the municipal service review, get the property annexed. Took a long time to get that done to where they could possibly move forward with their project. And now saddle them with this, I'm not sure that's really fair play, in my opinion. I know they're close to pushing it out now, but.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit more information on that, the money that we're holding from that project, you know, that was put on hold with the moratorium several years ago, is the property owners. Florsheim is the developer that they're choosing. And I've had conversations with Florsheim several times over the years because we've been trying to have that move forward with, you know, all these things coming into play, council taking action to allow for certain properties outside of the moratorium to be able to move forward with annexation in the future, updating our municipal services review, those type of items. And so here we are there. Like Jalen has said, which he's the one that's been taking the lead and speaking to them directly more recently. They are 100% fully aware. It's something that they do in just about every city they build in, and so there was no shock sticker, anything like that. It's typical in the business they're in. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jalen, developers that are experienced on it, for the most part, kind of take the lead on it as part of their project, correct? And so they also have that experience too, taking the lead on that. I'm just putting that out there.
I'll back that statement up and say, let them work for us, though.
We have money that's put away, but it is the property owner's money that's getting put towards the project. And they've shared that information with Florsheim, and they've all been working about that money with each other, so.
Okay. I'd like to retract that statement. Let them.
Well, may I?
And I just, you know, Dominique is 100% correct here. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think if they had their preference, they would, you know, choose not to have a CFD versus have a CFD, just because of, you know, the cost that is then borne onto the resident. The resident will think about that when they're comparing homes, and, you know, a non-CFD versus a CFD neighborhood, there may be a decision there. I do want to paint, yes, it is an additional cost for residential or commercial. I do think you find sometimes on the other side of that coin is all businesses and homeowners want to be in a community that is well-maintained, well-policed, well-fired, has nice parks, nice landscaping, nice streets. And so that is a desirable place to be, and there's a cost associated with that, of course. So there is the other side of that coin as well, where, you know, some people, there's a benefit to the cost that is borne to the resident or the business.
I would just like to chime in and say we do have well-maintained streets and whatnot without the CFD, you know. And just as my chiming in with my opinion, I am having a hard time today with the CFD, just with the state of the economy, how it is right now, prices and inflation going up right now. Just in this conversation at this very moment, I'm having a hard time. If we do move forward with CFD, I'd like just the residential, but even then, in this conversation at this very moment, having a hard time putting more costs on citizens, even if they are new citizens to our city, so.
What do you need from us, staff, tonight on this topic at this point? Had lots of discussion here, but let's circle back to what we're looking for from us.
I hate to make assumptions, but it sounds like the direction is to move forward with exploring the residential portion further? How would you word it, Jalen?
It really is, and I'll be a parrot here. It really is at the discretion of the council. You know, obviously anything from drop it tonight to, you know, let's approve it at the next meeting type of thing. You know, we've talked about residential versus commercial industrial. We've talked about timing. We've talked about no multifamily. So I think, you know, some direction on where staff's energy should be in this. Should we move forward with it, not move forward with it, and what land uses is apply for?
Do we need consensus or a vote?
Just consensus at this point, if the direction, for example, were, you know, to come back at the next meeting with a more tailored presentation having to do with like residential only, what it would cost to get a consultant, which areas you'd be looking at, maybe, you know, that could be an example of direction you would give, at which point you would just need consensus on that. No formal vote unless you're, you know, going to really direct something very specific.
And you did the RFQ already for the writing of the CFD?
No. We have Harrison Associate who does our landscape and lighting districts. So we asked them, because we have a relationship, how much it would cost to prepare the first CFD, and they provided that number to us. So no RFP, RFQ yet.
I think if this council so chooses, it would be prudent to issue a formal RFP.
Like to narrow down the focus to just residential only, single-family home. We can obviously discuss a go-live date, if you will. In the future, we don't have to decide that tonight. But I think that's something we would want to fish out there, RFP for sure.
Mayor, if I may, based on what you just said, there may be, and there may not be, but there may be a concern with breaking out applicability to single-family versus multifamily with equal protection type things. And so what I would like is not necessarily to change your direction, but to allow staff to work with legal to make sure that there's nothing, if the direction ends up being to go single family only, that we've vetted that that's an appropriate thing to do rather than residential generally.
Right.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Now that we have the junior units, what are they called?
ADUs.
The ADUs, do those now qualify as multifamily properties, or are those single-family properties with a second unit?
That's right. So the A in ADU is accessory. So they're accessory to the main dwelling unit.
Okay, so that would be a single-family.
That would still be considered a single family property. Mhm.
We're going to stare at each other for a second here.
Well, that's my opinion. I'd
It sounds like we have
for later, but I
consensus,
don't think that's
generally
going
speaking,
that
for
way.
residential only. Find out with legal what trouble we may get into or not get into if we have to deal with multifamily, duplex, fourplex type stuff, apartment, complex. And then come back with those ideas for us.
Okay. We will, we'll start inching forward and, you know, bring it forward to council for your ultimate consideration. Sorry for such a slog item so late at night.
No. Important item. Last item, council communications, future agenda items. So let's go around the table here. Councilman Engel, what you got for tonight?
Oh, geez, if you didn't like me a minute ago, you're not gonna like me now. All right, first, let's start with the good stuff. Justin, hey, thanks.
right, yeah.
Thanks and good job on the pickleball court. Thanks, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, got a list here. One, I want to reiterate my disappointment in the video recording. It's super important. As I said earlier, Yvette's done a great job with improving the minutes, and I appreciate it a ton. But I 100% believe we need to be able to count on going back to the video and holding each other accountable for what we've said. So do you have any ideas off the top of your head on how we can resolve this? Because we've talked about it a couple times now, and we're still having the issue.
So I'll have to look into additional options. I don't know, can I go into detail right now? Or
I mean, you can briefly describe
kind of
what you've done
elaborate?
to look.
It seems like somewhere between meetings, either, reg, planning, council, that additional buttons are being hit or touched and whatever, and it's affecting the next recordings.
Yes.
And so we've been coming out earlier, making sure things are working, because at the last time, for some reason, it jammed up. We had a previous meeting where just things are not the way they're supposed to be. And so we've been taking updated photos, passing them with all the staff that utilizes, because we do have multiple staff utilizing these items. And so I think at this point, it's just going to be needing to take the time on the Monday before the meeting and run through a test scenario every meeting to make sure it's working when the meeting starts.
Well, I was just going to recommend or ask if it's possible, if when we start the meeting, if somebody here or on staff can just simply go onto YouTube and see if.
And that's what we have been doing,
If
yeah.
it's working, if the sound's coming through. I mean, that's the biggest part, right? We want to be able to hear it. We can't really see much, but we can hear.
Yeah, and that's what we did today.
Okay.
Last meeting, Yvette wasn't able to make the meeting, but I was here, and I double-checked and noticed there was an issue, and that's when I went in and reset and put everything back up. And then in the meanwhile, we ran the audio, because we record audio, video, and go-to. And I asked Yvette to take the audio from the meeting, incorporate it onto the video so that the whole meeting audio is on there, and then it matches up with the YouTube video. And so that's what the last meeting was.
Okay.
Was for some reason, it froze up internet-wise. And so as soon as that came to my attention, we did that. So I could talk to IT about internet connection, to make sure nothing else is stalling it. But for the most part, it's going to be us having to run the system before meetings to make sure it's working right and that all the correct buttons are pushed. Because it appears that's what it is when we're coming in here, there's a lot of lights on, and different lights are on, and the time before that, somehow in the computer system, things were modified in the computer, which is not something that we've seen before. So,
okay.
But yeah, it's going to be just having to take the time on the Mondays before the meeting and put an hour aside and make sure everything's working properly.
Would be appreciated.
Probably the best thing.
Two other things. As we come into an election year, we do have available seats coming up this year, and I would like to inquire of the council also of legal. Previously, it's only been open to residents inside city limits, and I believe that's not fair to our community, that there's folks inside of our sphere of influence that are upstanding citizens with a lot they can contribute. Children who are in our school district, spending money in our town, so still providing tax dollars to us, they should also have a say. What, if consensus is required, or is that something that we can do, or to be able to change it so that at least one member of the council can be within the sphere of influence of the city of Escalon and still hold a seat on council?
Off the top, I don't know. I've never been asked that question before, but that it's easy enough to look into. And what we could do is send a one-way communication, letting you know where we fell on that research. If it's a clear no, must be a resident, then that's easy enough to express. If there's the potential that it could be opened up, then at that point we could bring it back for final direction.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the last one. I didn't have a lot of time to research this, so this is just really a question as well. As a city, do we have the ability to tax individual, let's say businesses? My thought was like fast food. I know there's been a lot of hoo-ha about fast food in town and not necessarily wanting any more, or maybe wanting more. Is there an ability to place an additional sales tax on such an industry? Like say it was a 1% additional sales tax on fast food within our city as far as revenue generation? Yeah, I said it. I said it out loud too. The city needs revenue, and we need to come up with some ways, and I haven't heard of any others. So is this something that's pursuable, or is it just a hard no?
Again, not, not a tax lawyer specifically. I do know there are some Byzantine requirements around taxation of specific business, because the state has their say, then the county has their say, and then the city can only do so much on top of that.
Right.
I'm not saying it's impossible, because I'm thinking off the top of some examples that I know of that cities do. So
The state's doing it to us.
transient occupancy taxes is one example, right? Like cities that allow non-hosted Airbnb rentals essentially within their limits, they can set a city-specific transient occupancy tax on those parcels. So there may be something akin to that for fast food specifically, just to give one example. So let us, unless anyone on staff knows off the top of their heads, but otherwise I'm happy to look at that as well.
Yes, please. I'll stop there.
All right, Councilman Stroman.
Just want to thank the community for coming out for the workshop prior to the meeting. Got a lot of feedback, a lot of good input, so thank you for that. And for those of you that attended the other workshop last Tuesday, thanks for attending that. A lot of good discussion tonight. Appreciate everybody sticking with us, and that's all I have.
Councilman Walker.
Sure. Happy New Year, everybody. We are back. We have a big year coming up. Hopefully, we are going to hear from Hines on the wastewater treatment plant here in April to figure out whether or not, or how much they're going to help us contribute to our wastewater treatment plant. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to get back on track with our budget, hopefully more timely, and as well as our agenda, getting that back on more timely. So that is something I look forward to helping the city this year. We had a big, also the housing element, getting that going and making sure we're on time for that as well. Big park discussion today, so we do need to make sure, I appreciate everybody coming out. Everybody needs to contribute. If we didn't have that contribution, we'd probably get something that nobody would like, and that's something semi-permanent, and it would cause a big problem. That's gonna be with a lot of things. We need our community to continue to come out, continue to volunteer, continue to contribute. Thank you for the nonprofits that applied. I'd like to see more apply and contribute to our city. And congratulations to Escalon Strong for having your name now, right? And moving forward, the Giving Pantry. And with the economy the way it is, inflation the way it is, we do need more nonprofits and more community members stepping up and giving to each other and just helping the neighbors. So today was a good day with a lot of people and an Escalon local stepping up and becoming a police officer to start it all off. So congratulations to her as well. So with that, that's it for me.
All right.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Hagan.
I don't have much else to add other than to piggyback on the meeting today. It was nice to see our community conduct themselves in a professional way, and I was proud to see that we had a productive meeting, and there wasn't any yelling or anything. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. It's getting late. I'll keep it brief. Yeah, we had great discussion tonight. Good meeting, good progress on a lot of items. And we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you so much, and we're going to adjourn the meeting. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you.